Welcome, world, to Anywhere the Needle Drops, and welcome to 2025. That is right. Happy New Year to you all. I hope there are great things in store for you this coming year. You know, I know a new year is really just a flipping of a calendar page. It's all a made-up system and all that noise. But listen, I am all about any reason to put down some old things, pick up some new things, and turn over a new leaf in this here thing that we call life. So whatever the new year means to you, I hope it is something fantastic. Make it good, my friends, make it good. And we are here for another exciting year of Anywhere the Needle Drops and Red Chuck Productions. I'm so glad to have you with me yet again. It's exciting to get to do this stuff. It's you know, every once in a while I just think about, oh man, how lucky am I to get to do what I get to do. And we're going to do it for you again here in 2025. Let's keep on rocking. Let's keep on doing this thing. We have a fun year for you coming up. We're going to do, of course, the magic we always do here at Anywhere the Needle Drops, covering the local, the regional, and the national music and culture scene. We have some exciting guests on the docket. There's some new stuff. We've got some returning guests that I'm really excited about. Yeah, it's going to be a fun year. We're going to bring you more of those ATND live sessions. And you know what? Stay tuned. There might just be even more exciting news coming up here with Red Chuck Productions in 2025. But first up, we have the first episode of the year of Anywhere the Needle Drops, and we are welcoming to the Red Chuck studio, well, technically welcoming back, we'll get to that in a moment, but it is Shiny Black, Goshen's Shiny Black. I welcome Amber and Nate to the studio. So we actually did this thing, I think this past summer, maybe I had them in the studio, and as happens sometimes in this world, that interview was lost. It's just gone. It's somewhere out in the ether, never to be found again. So I had to humble myself and approach Amber and Nate and say, hey, can you guys come back to the studio and let's do this again? And luckily, they were gracious and came on back, and we had a great time. We talked about their dive into the music world, coming from a history of being somewhat isolated in culture due to things like religion and economics and other things, and just sort of the path they found to where they are today in their musical world and what they're working on. There's even a hint that maybe somewhere down the road we might get a new album, so that's exciting because I know I do love that last Shiny Black album. But yeah, it's a fun chat. Amber, Nate, and I hang out. We chat about tunes, we chat about the world, we chat about creativity and finding your artistic voice, all the stuff you come to this show for. So check it out. We're going to throw you to a song from that most recent album first. That is Stranger in My Own Town. The interview follows. Again, Happy New Year. Here's to life.
reach you. Can I be honest? It's hard to be honest. I don't wanna be run over. One misstep and I'm black and blue. Maybe we could slow this thing down. Stop the whirling cacophony. Will you get off this ride with me? Let it be, let it be. I'm a stranger in my own town. There's 1,000 native tongues. When I hear them, I don't understand. I'm a stranger in my homeland. From 1,000 miles away, I can't shout loud enough to reach you. I don't wanna miss this moment. Bury our deepest shame by making more of it. We run from pain to convenience and demonize whoever threatens our carefully crafted masks. So I ask you, do you feel alone? Do you feel alone? I don't wanna miss this moment. Bury our deepest shame by making more of it. Run from pain to convenience, demonize whoever threatens a carefully crafted mask. So I ask, do you feel alone? Do you feel alone? Do you feel alone? Oh, I'm a stranger in my own town. There's 1,000 native tongues. When I hear them, I don't understand. I'm a stranger in my own land. From 1,000,000 miles away, I can't shout loud enough. I can't love hard enough. I can't be strong enough. I can't work hard enough to reach you.
Shiny, shiny black. Welcome back. Nate
Yeah.
and Amber here. This is the second time we've had a lost episode. Only the second time in like 12 years. So I guess I'm proud of that, but also
Yeah.
I felt so bad. I felt so bad. And especially I was afraid to tell you, Nate.
Why?
I was like, oh man, cause you're like the sound pro dude that I know. And you know,
You think I've never lost files before? Never had a corrupt drive just out of nowhere?
Yeah. I still don't know what happened actually. It was just gone. It was just gone.
That's funny.
Yeah. So, but hey, you're back. You're back playing down the street at Iron Shoe Distillery
Yeah.
and back at Niles, which is always fun. And we're gonna do this again. We'll probably tread over the same territory, but it's been a couple of months now, so
yeah,
I don't even remember.
We've
what
had
we
to think
about.
time to think about it.
Yeah.
Think about how we could do a much better job.
Yeah, it was meant to be. It's going to be a much better episode.
Some serendipity.
That's right. I'm sure there was something terrible there we didn't want included. So yeah. All right. What's new in the world of Shiny Shiny Black?
Well, we are starting to work on a new record. So that's been good. And I've been playing with winter themes, like, in my writing, since I'm like, oh, well, winter's coming. So hopefully in, like, mid-winter or so. Do you like how that's nice and vague still?
Sure.
We'll be seeing some new music.
I had Loon in here, and when I asked them about the release date for the new album, they're just like, it's just gonna, one day you'll wake up and it'll be there on Bandcamp,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we try to let people know, but it's always a moving target until you really know. So
yeah, until the project is mastered and you have the artwork. Because those don't necessarily have anything to do with each other.
Sure, yeah.
I've definitely been part of a few projects where it's like, well, we got the record done, but the artwork is, so until those things are done and you're ready to send it off, the deadline is arbitrary.
Sure.
It's an illusion.
Yeah. And then there's all those other elements, like, if you decide to release on vinyl, and what if there's a vinyl shortage? Those things keep happening,
Yeah.
Stuff like
Right.
that. So, yeah. I definitely get that.
But we're excited to be putting out some new material. We've got some new songs and some kind of getting into some different territory with this record, because Simon's definitely playing a little bit more of a prominent role, but also we kind of decided to fully embrace the drum machines for this, which definitely has a pretty significant impact on the sound of the band, and kind of where we can and can't go. That's pretty different than the quote unquote real drums. So yeah, we'll be excited to kind of see how that all comes together and hear the idea come to life.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you guys share songwriting duties, or does one of you tend to do more of one or the other, like lyrics versus, music, or?
We do share duties of various kinds. Although, the band started with Nate primarily, and so he's written more of the songs overall.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more of a lyricist among writing songs. Like, I would write poems and stuff, even outside of writing songs and music. So I think as I've dug deeper into that role, like, I'm bringing probably more of the songs this time. And then we have another writer we work with, and we're using some of his songs on the record. So it's kind of a mishmash. But we do all work on all the stuff by the end of when it's done. So someone might bring a song or an idea, but then we're going to develop it together.
It's rare for a song to make it through the gauntlet of Shiny Shiny Black without being touched in some way that changes it from its original form. But I think that's a good thing for the most part.
Yeah.
So I know Simon plays out with you a lot. Does he have a hand at all in that craftsmanship of the song, or is he just strictly there to play,
At this point, I mean, Simon plays what Simon plays. There's a limit to, like, telling Simon, like, hey, play this part. But he also brings so much of his own ideas to that, like, if you're bringing him on board, you're bringing him for that reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We want him to play what he wants to
do
play.
the Simon thing.
Right.
Yeah,
to do the Simon thing.
So,
but in the sense of, like, him actually being like a member of the band in the business sense, and, like, having direct say, and, like, I don't want to do this song because I don't like it. Like, that doesn't exist.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I would say, like, we're consulting Simon about developing the music at different points, but, like, the songs structure, like, or the song idea, we're usually bringing that to him at a like later phase. So
And it even kind of like the sonic direction of the thing is really more coming from us, and Simon goes, "Oh yeah, I can do that. What about this? Do," and he just dials something up, and it's like,
yeah, the great thing about Simon is he really can catch like the vision of like, what's the seed of this thing that's here, and then how can we make it more that way? And he's a great partner.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So how do you decide who sings a particular song? Is that based on who wrote it, or is there some other factor in there?
That's probably the default.
Yeah.
Is the biggest factor of who wrote it, but otherwise it's kind of like what key do we want to do this in, or like what really works well, or what are all the sounds coming out to be,
Right, and what's maybe even the vibe or the range of the song, I think mostly it's oriented around who wrote the majority of the song, or who has like the most like direct connection to the origination of the song.
Or like when we do covers, it's often kind of based on, was it like originally a female or male voice singing this?
Sure, yeah.
But that's not even always the thing.
Yeah.
But maybe we do fall into that fairly predictably.
I try not to think about it too hard.
Yeah. We just do it. We don't think
Sure, yeah, whatever sounds the best, whatever feels the best.
right.
So I know we, in the last episode, we went back into the history a little bit. I'd like to do that again. So I have recollections. Of you learning the drums, I think, on pillows. Is that something? Did I just pull that out of nowhere?
Books, no, that's real.
Okay,
Books,
okay.
yeah, I put hardback books on my bed and taught myself to play that way.
Was this like a parental thing, like we don't want to hear that noise and you figuring it out? Or,
No,
okay.
no, buying even like a $20 drum set at a garage sale was probably out of the question for my family at that time.
Sure, okay.
And so it was like, use what you got. Somebody at church gave me a pair of drumsticks, and
Yeah.
they were broken on top of that. And we glued them together and used string and figured out how to make them stick together. And so probably the first, like, man, at least 18 months of me playing drums was like basically on a broken pair of drumsticks on some books.
Okay.
And then somebody felt bad and gave me a snare drum, and like I forget when I bought my first pair of drumsticks, but they were silly because I was like so enamored with, like, I didn't know anything, right? And I didn't have any instruction to speak of. And so I just went for the bright red drumsticks
All right.
because they looked cool.
So does the lack of instruction extend to the playing itself? I mean, were you just self-taught figuring that out? Was there
100%.
someone guiding you in any way? Or
No.
friends giving you tips? Nothing like that?
I watched this interview with Robert. Robert Randolph and the Family Band.
Yeah.
And he talked about, like, when he played pedal steel, he came up in the church, and like how that, like, you learn like how to sense when the spirit is leading, which really means like when I do something cool and the audience reacts, right?
Yeah.
Or when they don't, and how that, like, people, especially in like kind of those kinds of churches, feel free to come up and let you know when the spirit wasn't leading you.
Sure. Yeah.
When you were smashing the cymbals a little too hard and they were bothered by that. And, the language around that is hilarious. Usually has something to do with, like, I knew Satan was involved in these drums, kind of whatever. But you figure it out after a while.
Wait, is that the problem with AC/DC?
Yeah,
Okay,
probably.
okay.
But
All right.
you figure it out after a while, like, oh man, like, they don't give me that kind of feedback if I don't play this way. But man, when I do this, they all get excited and worked up, and that's a skill that you can develop in that context. And so that was kind of more the instruction that I got. That and the musicians that I was being kind of nurtured by, we're all like leftover hippies, and we're very into like kind of, I think they had been into jam bands and hallucinogenics a lot in a previous life. And so they hadn't let go of the idea that music should be spontaneous and evolve in the moment. And so I don't remember. I'd been playing music for a long time before I realized that like a set list was like a real thing that you should really stick to. There was no concept of that at all when I was coming up. And so that was really interesting way to learn. Like, it's much more about personal expression and about reacting to the moment than it was about like playing something by rote, like, oh, you've learned your rudiments and now you can execute them for, at a really high BPM on a practice pad for a long time. Like that was not a thing.
Yeah.
So
how did you go about, because you have possibly the most precise ears I've encountered, or at least, some of the most precise ears. Like, how did you go about honing that skill? Because I've seen you in a room just listening to things that, are so minute and so detailed. And the only other person I've watched do that in that same way is Paul Clemson down at 31 Productions.
Oh, yeah.
But it just fascinates me watching you guys do. Like, how did you go about like honing that skill set?
I was gonna say, like, as you're talking about the improv, I'm like, and then you swung the other way.
yeah.
To like
Right.
absolute excellence being the only acceptable.
You broke the rules first, and then you learned.
Right, and then I learned what they were.
And now he's sort of like maybe swinging somewhere in the middle. It's a more friendly place, right?
Hopefully. Yeah, I think that actually probably plays into the audio piece that you just mentioned too. Like, I was always just fascinated with sound, and how it made me feel, and so I wanted to learn how to I guess wield that effectively.
Yeah.
And I remember like there was always like certain things that always drove me nuts too, like high gain late 80s and early 90s guitar rock sounds like have this sound to them that I can't stand, which was ironic because I was playing in a lot of bands like that, but there's like this, like, it's hard to describe it, almost like this like sound that like is really abrasive and it drives my ears nuts. And so I was always like, how do we figure out how to get rid of that? And and that and then like I also remember like when I was a kid like really being fascinated with, like, my dad worked at this mechanic shop that was like an old farm that had been converted into like an implement repair place and then turned into a small engine repair place. And there was all these like metal outbuildings with concrete connecting them. And if you stood in them in like different places, you could clap and get the echoes to come back at you in different ways. And I always thought that was the coolest thing. And then that same place also had like a concrete silo, and you could go in there and sing and it would like echo forever, and it was like amazing. And so I think anything that I have learned has all really been in the pursuit of like kind of observing those natural phenomena and being fascinated by it, and then trying to figure out how to replicate it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that makes me think of, I went caving one time with a friend of mine who was a musician, and he had a great time going into certain spots and singing. Have you ever had the opportunity to go into a cave and test out the sounds in a space like that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or like there's a lot of both human-made structures, but also like formations in the world that are very sonically interesting to me. And there's even like this whole like world of what's called impulse response technology, where people can go and capture the reverberant characteristics of a space, and then can like share that data basically in a way that other people can use it. So like there's a company that's really famous for doing that for post-production for movies.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what's the inside of a car sound like? What's the inside of an actual telephone booth sound like? Like, you know, and you can take measurements of that and then replicate that into, you know, make somebody who's just talking onto a normal mic sound like they're in a phone booth, right? Or sound like they're in a cave, or etc. And I think that's very fascinating stuff. So
yeah. And Amber, you, as I recall, I think both of you kind of had your musical origins somewhat church-based. Is that correct?
Yeah, church and school.
Okay.
For me, Nate didn't.
Yeah,
do
for
as
me it was
much
100% church.
Yep. So I think my coming up was a little bit of the improv, but a lot more of the structure with music, like learning, you know, in a community choir and that kind of thing, and learning to compete at ISMA, you know, like Indiana State School Music or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think for me, my journey has been a lot more like being willing to be outside of the lines or whatever over time, instead of thinking, oh, I have to be like something else, you know, like kind of discovering that artistic identity gradually over time, versus Nate had sort of this, we just have different personalities. So his was a lot more like, I'm here, everyone, you know? So
what do you mean find my artistic voice? This is it.
Yeah, I'm already here.
What are you guys even talking about?
You want me to fix this? What?
Yeah.
Why?
So in that environment, you know, because the thing is that, particularly that church music environment, you're getting, you know, the opportunity to learn these skills and you know, try these things out. But there's also commonly in those worlds is a lot of restrictions, and so. How was it coming up in those places? Did you find yourself pushing back, trying to find yourself artistically, or even, you know, personally through music, through church? You know, what was that experience like for you?
I think for me, I wasn't necessarily like way pushing boundaries at that point, for sure. I did write my own songs, so I think I would sort of be like, oh, here's what they're doing at church, but also I'm just gonna make my own version of this for myself. That's when I learned guitar, was in high school on my own, because as far as publicly, mostly what I did was singing growing up, but I picked up guitar just because I wanted to write songs. So yeah, I think in that sense I pushed a little, but also, and this was just like, I grew up in a Mennonite church, but my church was a little odd for a Mennonite church because they did have a band and did have things that most of the other Mennonite churches didn't have. So I think I already felt like, oh, we're different or whatever. So it wasn't like a huge drain on the system. And I even, some of my closest artist friends, I even met in that space way back. So it's kind of an interesting, weird little experience. Not like the norm, I would say. But.
For me, I think I always felt like this real strong intensity with music when it was working right, when music was really like delivering the goods, so to speak. It was like this electrifying experience, like a physical, like electrification, like you felt like consumed by it. And the older I got, the more I found that like it felt like people were trying to remove that.
Like, let's make it manageable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They were trying to like kind of like make it so that it was innocuous or inoffensive, but in the process they were also like removing that electrifying element to it. And then I discovered like hard rock and metal in my very early teens, and then not too long after that, like thrash and like what would be like pre-hardcore, And that stuff like had that electrifying intensity to it to me. And so that like really, I knew probably by the time I was 15 that not everything that I wanted out of music was going to happen for me within the context of a religious setting. It just wasn't. And that really bothered me at the time. If in hindsight, with a little more perspective, it feels a little naive, but I knew that like I wanted something out of music that wasn't going to fit in that container completely, and that I had to move on in some way. So I was probably 15 when I first started my first like hard rock band with some friends, and went on from there.
Yeah. Are you getting any pushback from other peers or family when you're transitioning into or out of, I guess, maybe that box that the church was putting you in?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember getting grounded for listening to Stryper on vinyl at the library because my dad was like very ardently against, like, he was very suspicious of Christian rock. Like, he didn't have a box where that. He came from Haight-Ashbury in the late 60s, and heard the Grateful Dead and the Allman Brothers from his house, and so he had a version of like what that looks like, and he couldn't, like, I don't know, for whatever reason in his mind, like you couldn't put that and sort of religious music together. Like there was no box for that. There was no category for that, and he was very, I think maybe even reasonably so on some level, he was concerned about some of the things that he'd witnessed, because he graduated from high school from San Francisco in 1972. So he lived right through the worst of like the drug burnout that happened in San Francisco at the time, and like seeing all the people who were like dealing with like not recovering well from bad trips, and like a lot of the sort of vagrancy that came out of that. And like, he was just very concerned. Like I think he had friends that were touched by that. And he just did not want that for me. And I don't blame him for that, but I think there's a pretty big jump to go from like that equals Stryper.
Sure. Yeah. But if you're unfamiliar,
right. To the uninitiated. And so for me, like, trying to like, there was definitely pushback, especially from my parents. I think they had kind of bought into the idea that like that kind of music was immediately going to take you straight down the path of darkness. Yeah. And,
it's a gateway drug,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that was my, I guess the pushback that I had was just like, I wasn't really chasing any of whatever that was. I just wanted to feel the way I did when I was 5 and everything was so exciting and intense. When the drums were going and everybody was singing at the top of their lungs, and it was like, because that was what I experienced in church when I was a little kid, was like just everybody kind of going for it. Yeah. And feeling that like kind of rush that comes from that, and that was all I wanted. And I didn't really care what style it came in. The pounding of hip hop, that low bass of 808s was the same thing to me. Yeah. Like I didn't have any, like, I didn't care where it came from.
Like cultural context.
I had none of that. And part of that is just because the way I grew up, like completely isolated from culture too. But like, I just was only chasing that feeling. I didn't care about like what form it came in, at all. I didn't care. Yeah. And so, it's funny now to look at that and realize like how like kind of misguided the concern about like, you're listening to heavy metal, like.
Yeah. Well, were there other ways that like culturally you like discovered the world outside of music, because I mean, I know there can be so many ways you're isolated. And then I knew people growing up who came from very religious backgrounds, and were kept away from the world, and they had a real hard time once they kind of got exposed to the culture at large, once they were out and about in the world,
Yeah. I mean, What was your experience of that, Amber?
Trying to think what do we want to focus on, but I think I was isolated in certain ways, so it's sort of like, okay, now, and then I was like a real school kid. Like I was one of those, like, I'm a straight A student, like, and so a lot of things that I initially, it was like college, like, oh, now you're reading different kinds of books. Oh, you're reading different kinds of things. But I also spent some time overseas when I was really young. Right out of high school, I was in West Africa for like a year.
Yeah, okay.
And so I think even that, just an experience outside of like the, like middle American track, which is like high school, go to college, get a job, da-da-da. I
Check the
already
boxes,
sort of
yeah.
I diverted a little bit with doing the year off thing. And that was really good for me, but it also made me sort of like question a lot of whatever I assumed about how life was going to go or what things were about. So it just made me a lot more open to like going deeper in a variety of directions when I was back in college for a few years. So, but sadly, like I am not as much of a rock person. Like sometimes I like to kind of claim it, but I'm not actually as much of a rock person like what Nate is. So like even down to like some of the things I learned about rock were literally in like a rock music history class when we were like in a music program.
Sure.
And it's like,
yeah.
oh, and part of that's just the thing I am nerdy about is reading books probably more even than music. And so the people I the most admire even as musicians and artists is like often they're writers too. Like they have a literary side. So I kind of come in it through like a back door, I would say. Yeah. But yeah.
So is that what you're studying in college then? Are you studying music? Or because I know you have like a background in, was it nonprofit or?
Yeah, I did a little bit of nonprofit work, but we were both in a music program for 1 year. And then we, again, made another transition. And I ended up finishing with like a literature degree.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right, and
I didn't.
Nate didn't finish.
You just didn't finish. Okay,
yeah.
all right.
We're
Was
like
that
moving right along with that.
Greenville?
Yeah, Greenville
okay.
College.
Greenville College. Okay,
Yeah,
cool,
yeah.
awesome. So where did the production Nimblewit, where did production company come into it? Where did you get into sound engineering and all you do with that world?
Yeah, that came through for me. When I was in high school, it started with experimenting with one of my bandmates. We struggled to keep a band together, but there was kind of two of us who like were really into it, and so we did things like, oh hey, let's plug this keyboard drum machine that sounds kind of cheesy into your guitar effects pedal thing, and all of a sudden it's like, holy crap, that sounds amazing. And then trying to like record that and started volunteering, like running the mixer so that the other guy at church could go to the bathroom or have a day off once in a while. And eventually like that turned into this girl in my high school asked me to, or in my church asked me to record a tape for her playing piano so that she could give that as a memento to her senior class in high school. And that was like probably my first like real recording gig, was doing that. And then not too long after that, I ran into a guitar player named Tim Bashong, who lives in Syracuse. And at the time, like me and my friend Tony that I was bandmates with, noticed that some of the other bands in the area, they'd have like one song on their little demo thing that they would give out or sell that would be like infinitely better sounding than everything else on the whole tape. And it turned out like this guy was doing that. He was the reason why these sounded so much better. And probably around probably during my senior year of high school. I figured out like he was a guitar player in a band in the area that was signed to had a couple different record label deals, and he would tour playing guitar, and then when he was home, he would do a combination of tuning pianos and recording bands in his house as like side income to like fill in the gaps when he wasn't touring.
Sure, yeah.
And so I was like, oh, like that's cool. Like I could do that. Like I know a little bit about recording stuff. I bet I could learn, and I can.
It's a way to keep music in your world,
right?
Yeah.
Right, and also just to stay connected to people, and I really started caring a lot about how records sounded, and I wanted to be able to. Honestly, it wasn't even about like I want to make a record that sounds as good as X. It was more like I want to know how to make a sound. I want to make a sound that's interesting to me. I want to know how to do that. And so it started there. And I think somewhere along the way, I really came into the idea that like, oh, I could do this as a side business, because it apparently isn't that hard to like sound a whole lot better than most of the people around if you like use your ears, you know, and
Says
It's not that hard. Yeah.
I mean, and
like-
it was a lifelong.
but like
Journey.
that.
Yeah, you've put in the hours for sure.
At the
Yeah,
time, though, the guy had an 8-track studio and a little like very cheap analog console, and it was just like his stuff sounded better than people who had huge consoles from the area.
Yeah.
But he was like, man, it's not about the equipment. It's about like how you use it. And so I really got into that idea and like, oh man, like if I really work at this, I could like distinguish myself from everything else that was going on pretty quickly. And so little did I know that
I would say
the digital music revolution was about to happen. And
that was right before like things got a lot more accessible to
Sure,
a lot of-
yeah.
and we were probably on like the front end of that. However, it still got a lot more accessible to a lot of people. But I think even like like I mentioned, we were in a music program for 1 year, and part of why we were only in it for 1 year is we were like, oh, we want like a really non-traditional life. That's what this was also our first year of marriage. Don't necessarily recommend that, but we just were ready to like kind of forge our own path. I mean, that might be a theme that you're hearing, is like a lot of self-taught, a lot of like, oh, there's nothing like that around here. Let's just create it. Like, let's just try and.
Sure, yeah.
I mean,
fill in
a
those
lot
gaps.
of it has been a hard road, but I think now when you're like, okay, 20 years on or so, it's like, oh, well, there's some things we know now, or like there's things we've learned just by doing the wrong thing.
Well,
like, you know.
yeah.
And so it's kind of exciting to see all those synergies coming together and what kind of emerges over time when you do that.
Yeah, and I mean,
So-
the work speaks for itself, you know, I mean, both in you know, what you guys do as a band, but then, you know, the production work, I mean, the proof is in the sound, but then also the proof is in the resume is incredible. I mean, you work
Thanks.
not just locally, but like regionally and beyond. I mean, the people you worked with, so it's real cool. You're clearly doing something correct. So keep it up.
Yeah.
Keep it up. So as we wind things down here, I know, so we're not going to get any specific dates on, you know, an album or anything like that, but what does 2025 look like for you guys? I mean, do we have any specific things that we know are coming or goals for 2025 for the band, for Nimblewit, you know?
Yeah. For sure, like new music, and we're early stages, but we're kind of plotting different travels that we hope to do with touring, and I don't know if you've heard of, you know, us talking about house concerts, but we really like doing that because there's such a cool intersection of being in people's spaces and really entering into a community in a different kind of way.
And people that really are there for the music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even like, you know, we have 2 kids, we have 2 girls, and like being able to bring them to shows and have it be a cool thing is really great.
Right.
And that's easy to do in those contexts. So we'll see. We hope to be on the West Coast again. We got to go this summer for an award, and hoping to loop back and maybe do some shows. But
Yeah.
Our other big thing we have to not finish, but make significant progress on is our renovation, which is a whole other artistic project of our house.
Yeah.
The farmhouse, which we didn't, I think we maybe talked about it at the last interview.
Yeah, it's like a very old house, right?
Yeah, 1878.
Okay, yeah,
So,
okay. So that's
Yeah.
and are you guys trying to like restore authentically?
For the most
at that
part,
level? Okay.
yeah. I mean, there's a few where we're like we're repairing plaster and stuff and learning about lime plaster, and then it's like, okay, but this section's probably gonna have drywall, to fill in because it's like you can't do everything, but whatever we can do. We're doing things like putting the old stair railing back together because someone tore it out and built a wall there, and there's just a lot of little things and big things that we're doing. So
Yeah. So
Awesome.
more non-conventional carve your own pathing
yes,
going on.
That's the best way to do it. You
Yeah.
know? I think if one thing I've learned in life is going down the written path is not always successful. First of all, and it's not much
Right.
fun anyway. So
yes,
yeah.
Yeah, not always successful is definitely like part of how you learn to do it.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you just make big mistakes and have to figure out how you're going to get out of them.
Yep. Unpaint yourself from that corner. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, Shiny Black, Nate, and Amber, thanks for coming back. I really appreciate it. And good luck with everything. Keep us posted on what you guys are doing in the new year. And we'll get you back on to talk about new music when the time comes. So.
Thank you.
Awesome.
ShinyShinyBlack.com.
Yeah, there we go. Check those show notes. Give musicians your money. You've been listening to Anywhere the Needle Drops from Red Chuck Productions. Keep up on new episodes of this show, our live events and various creations and other happenings over at redchuckproductions.com or by following us on social media at Red Chuck Productions. Special thanks to Hero Jr. for our theme music. You can check them out over at herojuniormusic.com. That is Hero, Hero, Junior, JR, music.com. A big shout out to Paul Clemson and Theory One Productions for handling sound duties and so much more. Check out their magic over at theory1productions.com. And a big thank you to Earthworks Audio for outfitting the Red Chuck studio. See their microphones and their other products over at earthworksaudio.com. Be sure to support all of our guests by visiting their websites, social media, clicking that subscribe button, seeing them live, and checking out their merch stores. Give musicians and artists your money. We'll be back with the next episode. Until then, thank you for your time. Here's to life.